Hi, yeah, thanks very much for the introduction. I'm honored to speak here today to you about sovereign AI. In fact, we talk about digital sovereignty for many years already, and sovereign cloud is also a term that we have heard more than once in the past few years. But sovereign AI is much more recent. I think only this year it's actually a term that we start to hear more often. So I want to take you on a journey and discuss what this means for us as Europeans. Let's go back to the past. Almost exactly 24 years ago, 9/11 shocked us all. It changed the way we saw the world, and now suddenly fighting terrorism became of utmost importance. So the USA Patriot Act was passed exactly for that. It gave US authorities like the FBI a lot more power. They could now demand data from US companies without going to the court before. And this was also true for outside the US-based subsidiaries of those companies. So for the first time, US law did not stop at the Atlantic. To the future a few years, Edward Snowden revealed how this data collection has happened worldwide, how millions of private data was collected, emails, phones, and so on. So it really showed us again how over the time of social media that was also very much arising in that time, we had all shared our private data, and now we saw that we were not sovereign, this was not private, we were not in control of our data anymore. So a few years later, in the EU, the General Data Protection Regulation was passed exactly to counter that, to make sure our data is private. And at the same time, the US passed the US Cloud Act, which basically legalized the Patriot Act even more, now forcing US companies to hand over data to the US government, even if, and that was explicitly stated, even if that data is stored overseas, like in Europe or anywhere else. So you see that it's really going into absolute different directions on different sides of the Atlantic. Then a bit later, the COVID-19 pandemic hit us and supply chains broke. And we were waiting for masks here and for vaccines, but also for chips. And whole factories had to stand still because chips from Taiwan couldn't be delivered anymore. It just made us really aware how much we are dependent on non-EU suppliers here in Europe. And then, of course, AI. We're talking about AI today. So when ChatGPT came out, this was for the first time an application, but much, much more than that, that allowed millions of users to experience what AI could really do firsthand. Yeah, from writing essays or creating code and shaping opinions, it really made us aware what AI can already do. But everything that came out here with ChatGPT and that hype was US-based. It was trained on global data, on US infrastructure, and it questioned, so the question came up here in Germany and Europe, are we just the users of this AI, or can we have a bigger role in this whole play? So with the EU AI Act, this was the world's first attempt to regulate AI at scale. Of course, you can discuss if that slows down innovation, and yes, the EU AI Act isn't perfect. It has lots of unclear enforcements and gray areas, but I still believe regulation is needed in this powerful technology, and this is the first step to play a role here and take back some digital sovereignty. If you look at what happened this year in April in the US, the AI Action Plan of the US cuts regulation, downplays bias, and basically treats AI as an arms race. I mean, those are very different approaches to AI, and I think it just shows us how volatile and unpredictable the world is. So I want to talk to you what has really happened. So when we are not sovereign, what can happen? And there are two stories that I want to share with you. One is OpenAI had a GPT 4.5 API released in the beginning of this year, but it was shut down just a few months after its launch. And what that meant, imagine you're a startup that built a product based on this particular model's API, and you spent weeks, maybe months, neatly fine-tuning your prompts and workflows around that model. And now the company decides to shut the model down, but not because it wasn't working, but because it was expensive to run for them. So yeah, you can imagine this one decision in Silicon Valley kind of breaking down whole businesses just because of someone else's cost calculation. This is dependence at the highest level. Another example is DeepSeek, a Chinese open source model that was released in 2024. When it came out, everyone was amazed how cost efficient it was trained, according to the publication. But then some journalists asked it questions on the Taiwan and Tiananmen Square, and it gave back very state-aligned, Chinese state-aligned answers. So it was very biased, obviously, as it was a Chinese model. Now, in this case, this bias was easy to detect, but it's not always that easy. So sometimes bias is very subtle and hard to detect. So it matters a lot from where we get our models, because models reflect the values of the data it's been trained on. Sovereignty means independence and control of our data, of our models, and of everything else. And that everything else is important because AI is not just the models. AI consists of a whole stack of things. There's a whole AI tech stack that we have to look at here. So the first one is the infrastructure. That includes, of course, chips, GPUs, and the infrastructure it runs on, like clouds and so on. And to be fair, with semiconductors and chips, we are not really sovereign in Europe. We don't really have many options here. There are a few strong players arising, but we still largely depend on TSMC for semiconductors and NVIDIA for GPUs. However, we do have European cloud infrastructure, like Telecom's T-Cloud offering. And those is essential to train and also run AI models and applications. So the next level is the data that you need to train the model on the one hand, of course, and also the inference data. That is what you use when you type a prompt, when you upload a document, or if you, for example, the memory of an AI agent system, that's also inference data. So any data that is going into the model when it's already running. And the AI model layer of the tech stack consists also of training and inference, so of training the model and running the model. You would want to know how was it trained, who trained it, and where is it running, how is it running. Sometimes you have configuration parameters, so you can control how the model is run. And then around the model, there's the application layer. So that is everything where the real systems are built, from AI-enhanced software or AI automation workflows or agentic systems that use external tools and memory and reasoning agents on top. And all of that needs to be governed and operated and secured. And across this whole value chain, we need to ask questions. What type of questions? I like to use a very simple framework. In German, I always say the 5 Ws, but it doesn't really work in English, with how, who, where, what, how, and when. Just to remember this, to guide you through your own assessment, how sovereign you are. Let's look at what questions exactly. You can ask, who is operating my infrastructure? Is that Europeans, maybe even Germans? Or is it outsourced to India or by some US citizens? You can ask, how was the training data selected? Does this comply with the EU AIDAQ regulation to have a very transparent training data selection process? Where's the user data stored? In Frankfurt or California? And under which country's legal regulations does it fall then? What is the model's architecture? Those Gen AI models nowadays are all neural networks, so they are like rather black box, but there are other types of models, the classical machine learning models that were decision tree-based models, for example, that are a lot more interpretable. So when you want to know how the model behaves at runtime, also you're going to, how does a model behave? This is important information. Does the model give deterministic answers? Does it behave ethically? Does it reflect our values? And finally, in the application layer, you can ask questions like, when do I need to expect service disruptions? Like the story I told you about GPT-4.5 that was suddenly shut down. All those questions, every company that uses AI should ask themselves. Otherwise, or if you just know one piece of the puzzle, you're not in full control. So T-Systems offers solutions along the whole end-to-end value chain. I have a question for you. How many of you knew that the Deutsche Telekom had its own cloud, T-Cloud? That's not even half of the hands rising here, so it's good that I can teach some of you something new. I'm glad about that. So yeah, we do have our own cloud ecosystem. It's now rebranded under the new term T-Cloud, and it's everything from public, hyperscaler-style cloud to a wider range of sovereign cloud options. And now we're building the AI industry cloud in partnership with NVIDIA to empower the German and European industry with high-performance, large-scale AI compute power, and all that embedded in T-Cloud ecosystem. And then the AI foundation services come into play. So this is a kind of a package that combines everything you need for Gen AI-based solutions. Its core is the LLM serving, so where we offer more than 15 different state-of-the-art models, that is large language models, but also models of different modalities, like for images and speech. And all that comes from a unified API, so it can be accessed from one access point, very flexible and securely hosted on the T-Cloud in Germany. If you want to try it out, you can actually get a free API key at the T-Systems booth right outside of this hall here. But the second pillar of the AI Foundation services is the Smart Chat API, we call it. So it's basically a secure and open source way to connect your company's internal data to any AI-based applications. That can be chatbot solutions, it can be assistants, it can be anything you want. Then there's the model adaptation pillar, so everything around fine-tuning and custom model adaptation. We, for example, currently running a pilot to fine-tune a speech recognition model for the medical field, so for it to recognize better drug names and medical terminology that is used in German hospitals. And then, of course, the end-to-end solution, finally, the thing that is being used. We also have building blocks, like ready-made building blocks that make the development of custom AI solutions a piece of cake. And beyond AI, we're also working on making the technology stack in Europe more sovereign. We're pushing for digital identities like the European Union Digital Identity Wallet, and we're also strong in data spaces. So that is the decentralized data management systems, where Catena X is the most prominent example from the automotive industry. So overall, we don't have just one product at T-Systems or Deutsche Telekom, but we're trying to build, and we're building a whole sovereign AI ecosystem here. I want to dive a bit deeper into what sovereignty really means in the model space. So there are various levels of sovereignty here. The first is the API access to proprietary models. This is like GPT-4 or Claude, for example. It means you can use the model, but on someone else's server. So it's like a black box. This means you have no sovereignty at all. Then a step up, we have the open weight models. So weights are those parameters that you need to run the model yourself. And examples are here the GPT-OSS that was published very recently, and Llama 3 also. You can host the model, and you can also fine-tune it. So it gives you some degree of sovereignty. Then even further to the top, there's open source models. So they're not only the weights, but also the source code is open, or the used tech stack is open, and depending on the license, you might be able to modify it, fully own it, and even replicate it. Examples are Qwen or even DeepSeek. We consider this operational sovereignty. But the highest level of sovereignty is technological sovereignty, and that you achieve just with building your own models. And with own, I mean us as in we Germans, we Europeans, or we that we share common values, because it doesn't mean that every company or every person has now, of course, to build its own model. So only if you are sure that the way the training data was selected, the way the training was performed, is fully transparent and aligned with the EU AI Act regulations, only then you can consider the highest level of sovereignty. Two examples here. The first is Token 7b, which was trained by Fraunhofer. It was the first language model that was trained on all 24 official European languages. And that's important because language is culture and reflects our values, and everything that I told you before makes it much easier if you already consider this while picking the training data. With the models that are based on 90% English training data, you will never really have this European aspect in it. We are running Token 7b also on our AI Foundation services. Another more recent example is Apertus. So this is a new model that is being trained in Switzerland by the ETH Zurich and EPFL. And this is special because it's the first generative model that is really trained along the whole EU AI Act's transparency regulations. So every step of the training cycle and every piece of data is documented and also published. So this makes this the, I would say, most compliant model so far, as of my knowledge. And this one we will also put on our AI Foundation services by next month or so. So yeah, it's really the question, what level of sovereignty do you need? You will for sure not always have the highest sovereignty requirements. It's always about finding the right balance between independence, functionality, cost efficiency, and to find the sweet spot in here is a challenge, but it's possible. With that, I'm coming to the end. Yeah, Stephen Hawking once said, AI is either the best or the worst thing that will ever happen to humanity, and I believe our job as Europeans is to make sure that it's the best. And we may not be the biggest player in AI, but we can for sure play a big role in making AI safe, trustworthy, and sovereign. Thank you very much.